Why did you get fired?
Experience 1. My manager kept losing my class schedule. Worked at a Subway. I had class 2 days a week. Several times he put me on those days anyway. I gave him multiple copies every time. The owner took me off the schedule for calling out too much. When I showed the owner proof, he said it was too late and they already hired someone else. This was 12 years ago. I'm still mad. Experience 2. A business I went to long ago was hiring and I got the job. Right after I signed all the paperwork, the department manager came in and asked who I was. I tell him I was just hired as a temp. The manager says he never authorized any hiring and fired both me and my boss on the spot. I did not work for this company at all, and they fired me. Experience 3. I was denied a raise by HR after consistently working 60 to 70 hours per week, and my VP, who had supported and requested the raise for me, told me to stop putting in the extra time, work my 40, and spend that extra time applying to new jobs. Within a month, a meeting was called to mutually part ways because my work wasn't getting done. I was gratified to learn that they had to hire 2 people to do my job after I left. Edit. Sucks to see how much this resonates with people who have been in a similar situation. I left this job back in 2015, thankfully. The VP is no longer there either, or good for him. Experience 4. I got fired once for putting in my 2-week notice. The only other time I've gotten fired was working for a trade company during the first week. I was a supervisor, and there was a second supervisor on site. I got a call that my wife had been rushed to the hospital, which was literally less than a mile away. I asked the other supervisor if I could go to attend to her, and he said, "Sure, no problem, I've got things here. Go." I returned to the job site later to find the boss there, and he let me go on the spot for leaving the team without a supervisor. He knew what had happened and still fired me. I won't lie, that one kind of pissed me off. Experience 5. This isn't why I got fired, but this is why I didn't get a job. I was 16 and looking to work at a Dairy Queen as my first job. My mom drove me to the interview, and I was super nervous. She looked me in the eye and said,
Just be honest and be yourself, and you'll do fine.
I walked into that interview, and when he asked me,
"How long do you think you'll work here?"
I responded, "Until something better comes along." Experience 6. I talked my way into a job at a software company when they put a hiring notice in a local paper. I had no idea what the software did. I still don't. They hired me as a trainer, and no one ever explained what the product was. I did a few weeks where I was trained on the software, but literally none of it ever made sense to me. It was like they were speaking gibberish. One day I showed up, and a lady I had never seen before gave me a check and walked me out to the parking lot. No one even ever said "you're fired" or anything. It's one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. Experience 7. I missed a lot of work because my wife got brain cancer. They called me in for a meeting and said, "Sorry, we are downsizing and letting a lot of people go." They didn't fire anyone else, including a coworker who was caught fabricating reports. Experience 8. My parole officer wanted to make sure I actually had a job, so he went to my employer listed on my file to surprise visit me on the job. I did home wiring, so I worked at different job sites and rarely in the office. He called me to say he was going to charge me with a violation for lying to him about my whereabouts. This could have landed me back in prison for my remaining 10.5-year sentence. The owner of the company had to speak with him and vouch for me. My parole office didn't charge me, but the owner sure did fire me that day. Finding a job with a felony isn't an easy thing, and it wasn't long before my PO threatened to charge me with a violation if I didn't find a job soon. Experience 9. I refused to come in 15 to 20 minutes early unpaid for my shift. I was always 5 to 10 minutes early, but they decided they wanted me there earlier. I carried on as normal as I was not coming in if I was not being paid. Turned up for a noon shift at 11:49, and no one would look at me when I arrived, then was thrown into a meeting and fired for being late. Was out the door before it even hit 12. It was the only time I'd ever been fired. Experience 10. I was a kid and just started at a local pizza place. I was let go a couple of weeks later because a pizza chef from Chicago had moved into the area and needed a job, so it was a business decision that I totally understood. A week later, went to go get my last check and asked how he was doing. The girl up front was like,
Pizza chef from Chicago? The only new hire was the manager's new girlfriend.
Experience 11. I was 19 and working as a janitor at a large self-storage facility where most days were filled with sweeping and mopping endless hallways of flickering fluorescent light. And when someone went delinquent on their bill, after a 3-month grace period, I would be instructed to empty their unit and dump everything in the trash outside. Once or twice, it was a person who died, but otherwise, it was pretty common to see a room full of absolute junk that someone got tired of paying for. Banged up furniture, garbage bags of ratty clothing, stacks of old magazines. It was usually pretty hoarder-friendly stuff, and not that I'd want any of it, but the policy was I had to throw it into the dumpster outside no matter what it was. One day I got notified to empty out a unit, so I grabbed the bin, cut the lock, and flung open the gate. The room is full of huge cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling. I opened one up out of curiosity, and it's full of brand new, unopened Gundam models. The entire room is full of them, dozens of boxes with dozens of models in each, and I'm talking the $50 to $100 ones I saw for sale at my local comic shop every week. The manager would check up on me once or twice a day, and that morning he walked up, and I showed him all of the brand new merchandise and said there has to be a better system than trashing all of this. He said rules are rules, something about insurance I didn't understand, and told me to throw them all away. So, I went and backed up one of the complimentary U-Haul style box trucks, picked a few models out for myself, and loaded it up the truck with the rest of it. On my lunch break, I drove over to the Children's Resource Center where I'd volunteered during high school. It's a place where any child, but usually poorer ones, would go after school for arts and crafts and activities to keep them busy until their parents got home. The people at the drop-off dock were so grateful before I even left, they were handing them out to some extremely excited kids. I drove back to the self-storage place with enough time to eat a sandwich and smoke a cigarette before clocking back in. But that's not why I got fired. I got fired because the manager came to check on me that afternoon, and after a while of looking around, found me sitting cross-legged on the floor of the janitor closet with model parts spread all around me, happily assembling a sweet translucent Zaku model. I was so entranced I didn't even hear him come in. I just heard this long, drawn-out, exasperated sigh. I looked up and he just said keys, and that was that. I spent the rest of the week assembling Zakus and Valkyries and lying to my parents about getting replaced with a Roomba. Experience 12. I asked the CNA I was working with to stay with a confused patient while I went and put a new 4 in another patient. The CNA left the patient alone. She fell out of bed and got a big bloody skin tear on her arm. After I took care of that, I went and found the CNA and told her the patient was injured because of her insubordination. The CNA cussed at me and left the unit. I did not see her again that shift. She and another CNA decided on their own to trade assignments. I wrote the CNA up. The CNA went to management and lied about me. She said I called her a racial slur and yelled at her. I did neither. Management fired me rather than deal with a false claim of racism. I collected unemployment. The CNA did something similar with another nurse a couple of weeks later and was fired. My manager asked if I could be rehired. HR said no. When my manager quit to start her own nursing agency a year later, she hired me. Experience 13. I got fired for submitting my timesheets on Monday at 8 a.m. when I got to work. By policy, they were to be in by noon on Saturday, but my Fridays ended in the field, so I just did them on Monday mornings. My bosses didn't even look at them until noon on Tuesday, so it had zero impact on them. I drove home from being fired feeling relieved because of how unhappy I was at that job. Experience 14. I was in my late 20s and had just gotten out of the army and wanted to finish school. I worked for a pet store as a groomer part-time while I was working on finishing up the semester. I put in time off for my final week about 3 months back, and it was approved by both him and the assistant manager. Everyone in the entire store knew I was going to be focusing on school for that week. Jackass calls me in the middle of one of my finals and left me a voicemail saying I needed to come in because they were one person short. I didn't even know until 45 minutes later when I walked out of class. He had called me 4 times, and on the 4th voicemail he left me a threatening voicemail. So, I called him back and we argued about my professionalism. So, I went into the store to have a conversation with him, which led to him threatening to fight me. I told him if he wanted to fight, then he could take off his name tag and meet me in the parking lot off company property. Suddenly, he became really freaking docile and just told me I was fired. So, I sent in the voicemails to corporate and found out a few weeks later he was transferred to a different store. Experience 15. I was a brand new engineer out of college. Light green. I got a job offer at an aircraft factory, Cessna, a Textron company, as a quality engineer. I had been an intern for 3 years and they helped put me through school. I worked in a projects group designing new floor layouts and how these business jets flowed through the process. I had always received good performance reviews, and that is why my internship turned into a scholarship and into a job offer. When I started full-time, I was assigned to a facility across town that did sheet metal stuff. I remember walking into the office on my first day and introducing myself to my new manager. She immediately turned away, refused to shake my hand, and ignored me. The next 6 months were the same. She legit would not speak to me, would not give me projects, would not schedule one-on-ones to give any direction, and if I was on an email chain and she was looped in, she would take me off. I would walk over to her, and she would hunch her back and try to cover whatever she was working on so I couldn't see, as if it was some big secret. Finally, I got involved in some continuous improvement projects. I was asked by our director to run with a few special projects, and I started, in my opinion, really finding a groove. Finally, she pulled me into a conference room and yelled at me for 2 hours, yes, 2 freaking hours, about how I was not doing the things she wanted me to do. She gave me a self-help book and told me I needed to read it and tell her what was wrong with me, and she terminated me without HR or anybody else knowing. To this day, I never knew what her problem was or why she hated me from the moment I introduced myself. I have a wonderful and successful career and currently manage quality for 4 factories in a Swedish conglomerate. If I ever see her again, I will tell her how I have modeled my management style after promising myself I would never be like her. My employees always know what is expected of them. How do they know if they are succeeding? Where they can go for help if they are not?
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's stories. If you want to see more stories, check out these videos or check the links in the description for more videos. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And ring that notification bell.